Hello. Happy Tuesday, everybody. Hello, Megan. Do you like my fierce background?
Look at you. It's like the Leo lion in the background. I like it.
No, this is one of Stephen's walls in his office. And I was like, this will not be a bad backdrop. It says born to win and has a line over here like
I like it. I like this energy.
made for me. I know it's a vibe in here. Different than my office, but it is inspiring to come in here. He has a really cool wall. These are like photos of like a lot of people we've either met or sold gym equipment to.
Oh, I love
Like
that.
no matter how many times I come in here, I see something.
Oh, that's so cool.
It's just good memories.
That's so fun.
Yeah, fun stuff.
I
Let
love
everybody
it.
get logged in. I just made him rush off a call we were on. Like, I gotta go. I gotta start this master class. Get out of my way. And get all my slides pulled up. Okay. Righty. Presents. I'm gonna leave it off present mode because when I go on present mode and people pop in, I can't always see when people are trying to get in. Okay. So today we are going to talk fun stuff. I feel like this is an area of really kind of expertise that unless you've been in real estate, and this is not me bashing new agents, but unless you've been in real estate a long time, I even had to brush myself up on this because we were in a real estate market for so long where we weren't really having to negotiate. We were just having to win by offering way over, win by being strategic. And I guess we were negotiating in some capacity, but we weren't really negotiating. So we have now moved into a market where negotiations have came back. It's not even negotiations at the beginning, sometimes that are the hard part. It's negotiations throughout the process during that due diligence period. Negotiations obviously start when your buyer wants to move forward on a house, but they continue as things become unraveled throughout the due diligence process. So, a negotiation in real estate is less about pushing for power. And let me say that again. Negotiation in real estate is less about pushing for power and more about stewarding peace, helping everyone find the table where the deal works and it creates a win-win for everybody. The goal is really to remove emotions and move forward towards a common goal. I will tell you, it took me a little bit of time to figure this out, especially probably as a newer agent where I wasn't as confident, where at times I felt like seasoned agents were essentially using their power to win the negotiations. It took me a little bit of time to realize there's an eloquence, there is a peace, there is a non-emotional agent that needs to come into every space and have the abundance mindset of we need to create a win-win for all. What does that really look like? Because you using your power, you using your knowledge, regardless of what the buyer and seller wants, will get in the way. I still even have to check myself and say, is this really what the buyer wants? Is this really what the seller wants? To me, it logically doesn't make sense, but to them, it works. My job is not to get in the way. My job is to facilitate a meeting of the minds that creates a win-win for both. And how you really do that is really communicating to both sides. So the relationship with the other agent is really what's key in a market like now, where you're negotiating more. You do have to have, and Megan and I did this, it was her first transaction. And okay. I was the listing agent. And I said to her, this is where my seller needs to be. Can your buyer get there? And that's what you really have to do sometimes. And when I first was a new agent, I was sitting there listening to these seasoned agents who sold 50 to 100 houses a year saying they're telling the other side what their seller's willing to do. Well, guess what? Sometimes if you don't do that, you don't bring a deal together. Yes, you need to have your seller's permission. Yes, they need to have full transparency in what you're communicating. But as long as you ask that on the selling side, they can come to you on the buying side and say, this is what my seller needs. Is this something realistically that we can bring together to reach essentially a common goal of going under contract? So the true goal is really what's the why behind your client and how do you help them get there? How do you remove all emotions, including your own first, and get over this fear of wanting to control the transaction to get to a win? I'm going to share this. This is a transaction we're going through right now. I'm the listing agent, but the buyer's agent. The due diligence doesn't end till September 15th. It was late Saturday night or early Sunday morning. She sent me the due diligence request and she says, we need to have a response by 5 p.m. today. And I was like, am I losing my mind? First off, I would never have a due diligence end on a Sunday. Sunday's like my day of peace. Second of all, we just went under contract this last week. There's no way this due diligence ends. So I went and looked at the calendar. It's September 15th. And I'm like, why is she demanding that we have an answer back by 5 o'clock? When we have to contact vendors, we need to get quotes on our own behalf. And we have 10 more days. And the whole time she's been wanting to control and tell us when we need to have something to her by. I said to her, I just want to remind you the due diligence doesn't end until September 15th. I'm not pushing my seller. What you don't realize as a buyer's agent, beyond after we've gotten under contract, when you're working through that due diligence period, the timeliness, how it's presented, and your energy will either get more out of the seller or less out of the seller. If it takes you a week after a home inspection to get them a due diligence request, I promise you every day that that seller's sitting and waiting and dwelling and grunting over things, you're going to get less out of that seller. I believe it's a true rule of thumb that every time you do a home inspection, within 24 to 48 hours, you should have a request to that seller. Because what you're not realizing is you're wasting a lot of time. If you're getting quotes, the seller can be getting quotes at the same exact time. You can waste a week's worth of time and a seller losing more and more patience, and you're going to end up getting less out of them than if you were to just take that repair request to them within 24 to 48 hours and say, this is what we're looking at. We're going to get quotes. Why don't you get quotes too? And in 3 to 5 days, when both of us have our quotes, let's have a meeting of the minds of how we're going to move forward. Because I promise you, I had another deal recently where they dropped a probably it was $13,000 repair request on us a day before the due diligence period ended. And the due diligence period ended the day after Labor Day. Well, guess what? On Labor Day, we ain't get no quotes, y'all. If you would have gotten that inspection report and request to us a week ago when you knew what you were asking for, you would have gotten almost everything on that inspection report done. But instead, you're getting $2,500 because you've pissed off my seller and you've not given us enough time to get quotes. It's not always in the what you're asking, it's how you ask it and how you present it and the timeliness of it. And when you're more respectful as a buyer's agent of that seller, you're going to get more out of that seller. I promise you. I've seen it happen. This is going to be a chart that I put my trademark on, but I've always used this as a rule of thumb. Us as agents, our main job is to keep everybody's emotions between the lines, including your own first. You keep your own emotions between the lines, and then your job is to keep everybody else's emotions between the lines. Here's what a seller or buyer are going to do through the transaction. Oh, we got under contract. They're super, super excited. Oh, now we got to do the appraisal. Oh, now we have the home inspection. The appraisal went good. Now we have the home inspection. Now, and you can see they go up and down and up and down. You want to keep them here. And what I have found, the more time that lapse from one major thing to another, you're making their emotions go crazy. When you get the house under contract, let me back up. When you make an offer and it takes that seller 24 hours to respond, what does your buyer's mind do? Goes crazy, right? But what if that seller would have responded within 6 to 8 hours? Not as bad. The more you can keep people's emotions at bay, the more you're going to get out of them. The less time that passes, the more their mind goes crazy or they sleep on it and they're an entirely different person tomorrow and they're no longer interested in the house. So keep that in mind. When you have a buyer that's hot and heavy on a house, make the offer quick. Make the offer within an hour of leaving the house. Get it over to that seller. Ask and say, hey, my buyer's super excited about this house. Whenever you present the offer, when do you feel like we would have an answer by? Because I assure you, the more momentum and the more urgency that you create with that listing agent and show that your buyer's excited, you're more than likely going to get a response back quicker. And then me as a listing agent, I know if that buyer sleeps on it, tomorrow they may no longer want that house. So I'm going to get your response back today. So I'm this masterclass is mainly focused for buyers, but I want you to think, you have two people's emotions you're trying to balance. Even as a buyer's agent, you should really be focused on what is it that you can present and do to help keep that seller's emotions under control too, because you're trying to get the best out of that seller. So why are you delaying getting them stuff? Why are you saying, "Oh, I'll respond tomorrow," or "Oh, I'll give you the home inspection in a week after I get quotes"? All you're doing is upsetting that seller, and you're going to get less out of them. You need to keep their emotions at bay too. And the quicker that you can move through things and the more you can create, you keep that momentum moving forward, negotiations are going to be a lot easier because the more time that spans, the more they get in their minds, you're just going to get so much less out of somebody. Has anybody ever thought of real estate like this before? With the raise of hands or, right? I mean, who's dealt with people's emotions? That will be our main job if we allow it to be. So your main job as an agent is how do I conduct my business that keeps everybody's emotions intact, where logic is leading the way? So I'm a huge believer in you cannot communicate too much. A lot of fear and emotions comes from your clients not understanding or not knowing what they need to know. So, if you're showing a house or if you're working through negotiations, a lot of the reasons why they sometimes push back is they don't fully understand what due diligence means, or they don't understand how you can offset sometimes closing costs by asking more. You can ask if you know the house is going to appraise, especially in a market right now where homes that sold maybe 6 months ago are selling for more than what homes have sold for right now. If your buyer needs closing costs, you can bump up the price of that house $5,000, ask for $10,000 in closing costs. It's maybe going to change their payment $20 a month, but it's going to save them $5,000 out of pocket. Unless you slow down and explain that to a buyer, they sometimes don't understand. They're like, well, why should I pay $5,000 more? It's not $5,000 more. You're saving $5,000 physically out of pocket, which is only going to cost you about $20 more a month. You have to understand the root cause of where their fear is coming from and why they're pushing back. And then you sometimes have to articulate that and then take it to the listing agent and say, this is what my buyer's hangup is. And I sometimes will just be very blunt, and it's taken me a long time to get there. And I will just clearly ask the buyer, my job is to help get you to where you want to go. There are going to be times in this process where your emotions are going to take over. My job is not to participate in those emotions. My job is to have your permission to continue to help get you to where you want to go and what makes logical sense. Is this something that you will allow me to do if I start to see that your emotions become unsettled? And then if you have certain times in certain situations, I sometimes will tell them bluntly that there's going to be certain times and situations throughout this process where I feel like if you're emotionally here, I'm going to tell you to sleep on it and let's touch base in the morning. And I think the more that you can articulate and have blunt conversations and set these expectations up front when it happens, it doesn't feel as to them. It's just like, this is how we work through things in a logical way. Because I'm not here to be an emotional agent that enables your emotions to rule the transaction. Because I never want to be on the other side of a termination saying, if I would have just kept those buyers' emotions controlled, we would be moving forward to closing. Because I promise you, most terminations are made out of emotion, not logic. Especially in a market that's beginning to shift, where I think sometimes buyers think that another house is going to be better, that's going to come on the market that's better. It's not. Sometimes the house that they're under contract in is the best house. And you, as a buyer's agent, need to know that and be confident enough to tell them. Or sometimes you also need to be confident enough to tell them this is not the right house. But sometimes we don't explain. We expect them to know that, like in our area, 95% of houses have crawl space issues. Well, we're not terminating because of a crawl space issue. This is going to be an issue that's probably going to be on every single house unless it has ten to $20,000 and essentially remediation and encapsulation underneath it. And even still, then it can be an issue. You have to set those expectations so that they know that no matter what house they go under contract on, this is going to be a thing. Crawl spaces are going to be a thing. It's just the nature of where we're at. But if you don't tell them that, they look at a crawl space and then you go and get them a quote and it's $15,000 to remediate it and they want to terminate it. And then they've lost $5,000 in due diligence. And then you go and do it again on the next house. And they're going to come back to you and be upset. Like, why didn't you tell me the crawl spaces were a thing? Don't be afraid to tell people the truth. What consistently comes up in inspections? Again, I'm going to go back to it's an emotional, you have to have emotional intelligence to keep them emotionally under control. If you remember when we first went over our buyer guide, one sheet of our buyer guide goes over what to expect in a home inspection. They should not be bombarded by a crawl space if you've went over that buyer guide with them because you've already told them this is what you should expect. So when it happens, yes, we are going to go to the seller, and this is the part of the negotiations that I want to talk about. Your job as an agent is not to just go drop the bomb on them. Your job as an agent is to drop the bomb on them and say, here's what we're going to do about it. So when you do the home inspection or when you get that report and you review it with them, we don't just point out all the bad stuff. We say, here are the 5 focuses that we want to focus on: structural, mechanical, hazard, fire, safety. Those are the things and structural, sorry. I said safety, I said 2 of the same. And structural. If any of those things come up, those are the things we're going to ask for. And we do have vendors that will get it quoted for you, but right away, I'm going to get it over to the seller so the seller can begin to quote it on their behalf too. And then we're going to have a meeting of the minds. Do we want credits? Do we want it to be fixed? What is it going to look like? Don't just go to them and tell them everything that's wrong. Tell them this is how we're going to work through it. We have people that will take care of it. I've already spoken to the listing agent, and this is what I do. I don't just drop news on them. I've already spoken to the listing agent. She said her sellers are willing to work through things. So here's what we're going to do next. Because the more that you can keep them emotionally grounded and centered, the more that you're going to smoothly move them throughout the transaction. So let's talk some scenarios. I've already talked a few. Do you guys have any scenarios that you want to share or that you need help with right now? What can I do to provide you value? Either in negotiations in the front end of negotiating a contract, negotiations with due diligence request. How can I help you negotiate?
I would love to know, like, are there any specific strategies or like kind of a formula? I'm sure it's on like a case by case basis, but like, say that if you knew like where they have to be, like, how close to that do you try to start? How much do you try to like wiggle each time it goes back and forth? Like, is there a maximum of times that you feel like is worth going back and forth? Like, just like any kind of context with when it actually, and I guess in that case, I'm talking more about like the pricing,
Pricing.
like when
Yeah.
you're.
So I'm always a huge believer, and you have to look at the full perspective and also communicate with the listing agent on where the seller is. Because sometimes I'll have people call me as a listing agent and I'll tell them, my seller's ready to move forward. We were getting ready to do a price reduction. Bring us an offer. In that case scenario, Megan, that would be a situation where I feel like you can offer a little bit less. So let's contextually give you some numbers. So let's say the seller is currently listed at 525,000. Let's say they've been on the market 45 days, have not yet done a price reduction. Your buyer's interested. Tell me what number is your buyer interested at?
Mm,
Maybe 480?
yeah, I was gonna say high fours.
Okay. So let's say 485. Well, I already know in my mind as a listing agent, my seller was about to reduce to 500, right? And your buyer's at 485.
Mhm.
Okay, so you tell me, would your seller potentially be interested in a high 4 offer? I'm not going to tell you that we were getting ready to reduce to 500, but I would say we were getting ready to make a significant reduction. So I
Okay.
would encourage you, if you know their max is 485, I'm a believer in don't piss the seller off from the get-go because you're
Okay.
not going to get the best out of them. So I would, if I kind of told you subliminally that we were probably going to reduce to around 500, I think a good first offer, I would be straight up and say like 480.
Okay.
And then if I were the listing agent, I would probably come back at 495. 490, probably 495 if we just reduce that much.
Mhm.
And I would say that's more than likely my seller's bottom dollar.
Mhm.
But if you're at 485 and I'm at 495, like what can we do to make this work?
Mhm.
More times than not, I only see people go back and forth like 2 to 3 times max. But I'm never giving up as a buyer's agent.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So don't like put yourself in a box and think there's a way, there's a number of times you go back and forth. I don't go, I don't stop till I've depleted every scenario.
Okay. So you're talking about like due diligence, like changing your due diligence, changing
Yeah.
your closing day, changing
Yeah.
your earnest money, like if
Yeah.
that's even a thing, or like, so
Yeah.
just trying to like, okay.
And I'll tell you too, when it gets deep into negotiations, sometimes the best thing to do is let a seller sleep on it. And sometimes that sleep is a week long.
Mhm.
And they come back to you in a week and say, "Oh, we'll take 490." When they realize they don't have anybody else interested, they have a bird in the hand, it's way better than a bird in the bush.
Yep.
And they may come back to you. And sometimes your confidence level in negotiations needs to be to tell your buyer, just be patient. Let's just let them
Mhm.
sit on it, knowing we may lose it. And I want you to know, are you going to be okay with that? But at this price point, and I'm also a huge believer in this, I would say for anything 400 and above, 10 to $20,000 should never get in the way of the buyer or the seller. Sometimes more so for the seller if numbers are harder on that side right now in certain situations. But for the buyer, it should never get in the way. If $10,000 is getting in the way of a $500,000 house, they probably shouldn't be buying the house. Negotiations get a little bit harder in those price points where affordability is a thing and people are buying at their max affordability. That's when it gets a little bit harder. And that's when I would say negotiations, you need to lean in and have relationships with lenders who can kick in and help sometimes.
Mhm.
You know, we have lenders that will provide $750 in closing costs. We have another lender that will, certain scenarios, they'll do $2,000 to $3,000 in closing costs. It's better to sometimes go and ask because your relationship with them is valuable, what they can do to kick in to help bring a deal together. And sometimes at those lower price points, I lean in on the lenders to give us a little bit to bring a deal together. Does that help?
Yes. I got like in the weeds on one like over the weekend. We ended up winning it, but it just got to be like we agreed on the price like of the house, but then we were like all in these like little due diligence, like
Yeah.
I'm sorry, no, little like closing costs and like them not wanting to pay.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it got to be where it was like down to, like you said, $5,000. And so I called the other agent and was just like, hey, I don't want either one of us to lose this over $5,000.
Yeah.
So,
That's
like,
the right thing to do.
what, what can we do?
Mhm.
So, yeah, that would have been like a good thing to know. Like, if it gets
Yeah.
down to that point, that's just crazy.
Yeah. And it is crazy. At that's a $600,000 house. It should
Yeah.
not come down. That's like $500.
Yeah.
It should not come down to that. But that's also like the logic that you need to like say to the other agent. So they go back and tell their seller and buyer that too. So what ended up happening?
We got it. We ended up like negotiating. She and I, though, like she had sent me something and I just felt like it was not enough. And so that's why I picked up the phone and called her
Yeah.
and had that conversation. And they ended up giving us 2,500 more towards closing costs than what they originally had. So we ended up closing out with like 6,500 in closing costs. And we had asked for 12,000. So it was like they almost got to half,
Yeah.
but I felt
It's a
like
win
that
though.
was, yeah.
A win. This is what I want to highlight. You cannot communicate too much. Most of negotiation is just communicating with the other agent to create a win-win. I think so many agents like I'll get an email blasted off to me and I'll be like, "What the heck?" This makes me not want to negotiate with you.
Yeah.
You know? And it makes me sometimes I have to sit and like remove my attitude and then call my seller because I know they're going to give me attitude and I'm like, I don't want to bring more attitude to it.
Mhm.
But I like decompress myself and go to them and I have the same first gut reaction to you, but my goal is to get you to the closing table. And why? Why is it important we sell the house? Okay, we're under contract on another house. You have to take it back to their pain point of what have we already overcome? We already have an offer in hand. We just need to keep this moving forward because I never want you to kick yourself in the butt for not,
Mhm.
you know, on either side of things. I don't want a seller or a buyer to be upset because I didn't push hard enough. And
Mhm.
sometimes in negotiations, it's confidence to keep pushing harder that sees you through to the finish line. So creative ideas. I'm just going to share a few that have been working for us. If you have a buyer who has went and showed some interest in a home but will not pull the trigger, maybe wants to go back for a second showing, still has not yet pulled the trigger because they're afraid to offend the seller, I would really reach out to that listing agent and encourage her to bring you a reverse offer, especially for a house that's been sitting on the market for a minute. Has anybody ever done a reverse offer? So essentially what it is you encourage the listing agent to bring you and your buyer an offer. I did this probably 50% of the time when there was like 1,500 houses on the market in our area. Right now there's like 420. So imagine 3 to 4 times the inventory we have now. There were 30 houses for us to choose from. So my buyer was sometimes overstimulated on what they wanted to move forward on, but there was a house that had maybe been sitting on the market at that time for like 4 months. They were interested in it, but they didn't want to offend the seller. So I would go to that listing agent and say, my seller wants to, or my buyer wants to make you an offer. They don't want to offend your seller. You know, if it's listed at 500, we were thinking we were going to come in at like 460. Take that to your seller. Bring us, what would be the best offer to us that you would make us? And 9 times out of 10, I think you'll be shocked at what they would be willing to offer. And anytime that buyer gets what they feel like is a special offer exclusive for them, they'll more than likely jump on it and be encouraged to move forward. Because sometimes it's just their hesitation of making the offer that keeps them from making the offer. But if the offer is made to them and they like it, you'll be surprised it may work. So right now, if you're working with buyers that are hesitant to make the offer or afraid to offend the seller, I would reach out to that seller and that listing agent and say, "Hey, my buyer's interested. Bring us an offer. We don't want to offend you. Bring us an offer of what you're willing to do." Especially if the listing agent has told you that they're considering a price reduction. So recently we were considering a price reduction. I had somebody that had came and looked at one of my listings twice. We just took them an offer and they accepted it instantly. And then my seller was under contract on another house. So our urgency to get that house under contract was up against a timeline of like a day. We had a day left. And we made it happen. But I think sometimes you don't always have to use the conventional way of doing business to do business. You can be unconventional and get people to move forward. So if your buyer is ever super interested in a home, speak with the agent first, figure out what the seller situation is. Believe it or not, it can sometimes be much more than about price. It can really be about timing. I have some sellers that, they want to sell, but they don't want to sell within 30 days. They don't want to close for 6 months. You need to articulate that because there may be a buyer whose lease doesn't run out for 4 months. You just have to match them. It's sometimes not always about price. It can be about what their life situation look like, timing, a kid graduating, a vacation, a sick parent. It's sometimes not about the price. It's about how do we create an offer that's a win-win for everybody with the time. Given that we can somewhat reach an agreement on price, how can we articulate the time so where the timing aligns, so where the timing is more powerful than any other actual factor of the offer? Does anybody else have any other creative ideas that they've done to bring deals together in that situation?
Amber, can I ask,
Hey, Miss Joyce.
when you're communicating with the listing agent in that way,
Mhm.
how do you start that conversation? Because I've gotten mixed feedback from agents in the past
Mhm.
when I say things like, so what in particular is important to your seller? What kind of offer can we design that would be really attractive? And sometimes I get some good feedback, and other times they're just like, just bring us an offer.
Yeah.
And and so they don't seem like they really are interested in relationship, just money. So how do you usually approach that? Is that the right way?
Yeah. So I think there's two scenarios. There's a scenario where, like during the COVID market, almost every single buyer's agent would reach out to me and say, "What's most important to your seller?" And I would always say, "Bring us a high due diligence fee and a short due diligence period, or as is, or whatever that looked like." I think that was more the market from yesteryear. Now, I appreciate the approach. And I'm telling you from like a listing agent's perspective, how you're going to get more out of a listing agent, I feel. I love a soft, warm phone call to me that says, my buyer is very interested in this home. They're already pre-approved. They have their house under contract. They need to be in somewhere by X day and time. This is everything that's important to my buyer. What's most important to your seller? And how do we bring a deal together? Because that feels more like we're working together versus you just wanting to get what my seller needs out of me. I
Yeah,
think,
that makes sense.
yeah,
Yeah.
when you approach it with a more like give and take, you're more than likely to get more out of the listing agent.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think I could be
Proud of
too
me.
just the facts.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
I can be that way too, Joyce. And I sometimes have to catch myself and slow myself down and say, if I were the listing agent and an agent was calling me, how do I slow down and articulate my buyer's situation to then also hopefully get the seller's situation out of the listing agent so we can work together and bring a deal together? Because that's really what it is. That's all you're trying to do in negotiations at the end of the day. So due diligence request. Anybody else have any other strategic or questions or anything they want to ask?
I have a
I
quick
had a quick,
question before you switch to due diligence.
Yeah, go ahead.
When a listing agent comes back and just says, what's your highest and your best, or like bring your highest and your best, do
Yeah.
you do you actually bring that, or do you try to like save stuff? I would
Absolutely. Absolutely. Leave when there's a multiple offer situation
okay.
and your buyer 100% wants this house, you lay it all out on the table.
Okay.
You talk about everything. I would get the lender on the phone too and say, what does going all in look like? Is it borrowing from our 401k? Is it getting a gift from a family member? What does it look like? If they 100% want this house, you pull out the stops.
Okay.
If they don't, then go with what they're comfortable with. And I'd
Okay.
ask that question, how would it feel tomorrow if we did not bring our best offer forward that we could bring and we didn't get the house? Are you going to be disappointed? And allow them to make the decision. But if they make the decision, Megan, to go all in, you go all in with them.
Okay.
Again, I think it's part of what our job is to do is to never make decisions. It's to educate and to get them to feel what it would feel like emotionally for them if it were to happen, because that's going to trigger them to make the best decision for them. Because if you said they told us to bring your highest and best, and they don't understand that that means if they don't bring it, they may lose, they're going to be upset with you.
Mm-hmm.
So articulate, this may mean if we don't bring our highest and best tomorrow, you may not have this house.
Yeah.
And take it
And
back.
to that point, it shifts to more like less about trying to save them money and get them a good deal, and more about like getting
Getting the
them
house.
the house.
100% getting them the house. I
Okay.
think you have to have that like negotiator hat of negotiate hard, negotiate smart,
Okay.
because the smartness is the winning the house, right? It's not the getting them the deal. The deal is winning the house. That is
Right. Thank you.
so welcome.
hi, Amber.
Yeah.
This is hi. So I had a question about, especially in this market where interest rates are a thing,
Yeah.
and seller concessions are also something that many individuals are attempting to get in order to buy down rates, and especially at the stage where you're just trying to get the offer accepted. But the underwriting and everything may change the story down the road. Are there any strategies or any points of verification that you do with your buyer agent that could help in terms of supporting you?
Yeah. Let me articulate your question a little bit more. Are you
Yeah.
asking from the listing agent side of things?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So I have been, if we are in a situation with a buyer who I feel like financially is getting this house by the skin of their teeth,
Mm-hmm.
I will call the lender and have questions and ask them questions. And honestly, sometimes this starts during negotiations. Like, do we need closing costs or do we have to have closing costs? And that'll be like one of my first questions back to the buyer's agent and or to the buyer's lender or together.
Okay.
That is the first indicator of like, is there a red flag with this buyer financially? Is that
Mm-hmm.
kind of what you're asking?
Yes,
Yeah.
correct.
Is there a red flag with this buyer from the get-go that I need to make my seller aware of.
Right.
I always ask, have they already been through the underwriting process?
Mhm.
Because if I have an offer that's coming to me through the underwriting process versus one that's just gotten the piece of paper, I'm
Yep.
going with the one that's been through the underwriting process. Joyce, it depends upon the lender. The lender will sometimes say, yes, they need them. I don't care if they don't. I just want to know, is it a hard yes?
Mm,
Like, is this going to be, are the closing costs the deal breaker?
got it.
If they're the deal breaker and I know that we're not going to have an issue appraising for $3,500 to $5,000 more, we'll
Mhm.
go up. And sometimes I've said in a buyer negotiation, we'll go up 5,000 as long as we reach the appraisal. If not, my seller's willing to split the difference. So let's
Mm,
say we go up to 505 to be able to give that buyer 5,000 in closing costs, but we
mhm.
only end up appraising for 5,025.
Yep.
Okay, so that's $2,500.
Mhm.
I would say at that point, the buyer and seller, we're going to be willing to split the difference from the get-go, knowing that
Okay,
that scenario may come up.
got it. And you already get their acceptance in case that scenario happens.
1,000%.
Okay.
Right now, um, unless it's in writing from the
Mhm.
get-go, I'm no longer doing verbal stuff like that
Mm,
because I've learned
mm,
the hard way.
right. Exactly. No, that's great. Oh, thank you for that,
Yeah,
Amber.
you're so welcome. Anything else before we jump into the due diligence? So I've already kind of touched on this a little bit, but the due diligence request, if you want to get the most out of the seller, timing of getting it to the seller is everything. By a rule of thumb, when I'm working with buyers, I have a due diligence request to that seller within 24 to 36 hours. Very rarely is it 48. The more the seller has to sit and worry, the less you're going to get out of that seller. Standard inspections within 3 to 5 days of an offer acceptance. I also love when a buyer's agent does a home inspection on like the 10th day of a 14-day due diligence period. Like, don't play those games. I'm not here for you to back my seller in the corner. And then obviously I said get the due diligence request over to the seller within 36 to 48 hours. This just means you're going to get more out of the seller. And then again, in regards to like momentum towards closing, you can get what you're wanting to ask for in a due diligence request to that seller, and they can be getting quotes at the same time you're getting quotes. And then hopefully within a week's time frame, you both can come back together and say, these are the quotes we got, these are the quotes we got. Here's what my seller's willing to do. Is this acceptable to your buyer? And keep things moving forward. I'm also a huge believer in anything that majorly comes up at the home inspection. You need to contact that listing agent and seller right away and let them know. Like if you have a cracked heat exchanger, anything safety related, a leak, let them know because sometimes they may not know and really you're putting them in jeopardy. I also am big on having a list of vendors that will get us quotes, either sight unseen or a ballpark within 24 to 48 hours too. Really just so I know what we're walking into for my buyer that gives us justification on what to ask for. And then again, I'm going to reiterate, do not waste everybody's time getting quotes. Just get over to the listing agent what you want to ask, what you ask for. And then no matter where you're at in negotiations, don't get in the way, advise, but let them choose. I see a lot of agents where I'll send over something back to the buyer's agent and they're like, my buyer's not going to accept that. And I'm like, how do you know? It's not your decision. It's your job to communicate the information and to let the buyer or the seller make the decision. Because what's logical to me and Megan may not be logical to Joyce. You can't assume what you think is logical to somebody else. Because oftentimes what I felt like was logical, I didn't realize they were trying to get here because mom was going to pass away in 6 months. That removes all logic, right? They want to be here regardless that there's a $5,500 repair that needs to be made. And sometimes those are the things that the people don't tell you. And I know that just sounded like super blunt, but it's reality. It's reality because I've lived it. I've lived it where I've wanted to push a buyer or push a seller only to come to find out there was a life situation that trumped any logic. And yeah, I maybe should have known already, but maybe they didn't want to tell me. But now they did tell me, and I'm like, this makes total sense. We've got to keep this moving forward. Vendors are your value. If you don't have a good vendor list, I would heavily focus on building a good vendor list. To me, a vendor is anybody that can help you, assist you in any way in your business, whether that's a plumber, electrician, a handyman, an appliance man, a painter, a drywall, a structural engineer. You need to have people that really partner with you that do business alongside of you because your vendors become a direct reflection of your business. So I'm just a huge believer in like your vendors need to match and align with how you do business. I never refer anybody that hasn't already done personal work for me. And you should have special pricing or they should give such a high level of service. And sometimes that service means they're timely to your clients because you can help build them businesses. I promise you, I probably have a handful of vendors that I help make 6 figures a year or more just because I send them so much business. So that means when I call them, they better show up and get my people a quote. And I know that may sound brash, but it's reality. I've helped if somebody came and gave me 100 grand worth of business a year, I promise you they're a VIP client. They're getting the best of the service, and I'm showing up for them 110% because they're a huge pillar of my business. When you start building your business, if you keep pouring into those same vendors instead of sprinkling it around, if you pour into the same 2 or 3 vendors, I promise you they're going to start treating your business like that too. And I would say over half of my vendors allow my sellers to pay them at the closing table, not even out of pocket. That's huge. That is a huge convenience I can now offer my seller clients when I have those vendor relationships with them. Who here needs to focus on building a vendor list? Vendor lists are huge. Megan, you just lean into ours and then sprinkle your people in it. And then we have about 15 minutes left. Yeah, I would say be super intentional. I did this a few years ago on like building out my vendor list, pouring into my vendors, referring them more business, featuring them on my social media. It's huge. And those people that you pour into, if they're a local business, I promise you they're going to pour back into you and bring you business too. It's just, it's human nature. If you're good to those people, I promise you, anybody that's brought me a lot of business, I am 100% good to them. And if somebody asks me, where do you go for financial advice? I'm going to tell you Rick Fisher. He's local. He sends me 3 to 5 deals a year, most of which are 500 plus $1,000 deals. So in my mind, he's sending me 50 to $75,000 a year in business. He is my go-to person. That's how you build a business. You're a small business owner. That's how you build your business to the next level. Okay, so let's open up the floor. Let's mastermind. If you have any questions on negotiations, due diligence request, absolutely anything. You have 15 minutes of my undivided time. I'm here to help you.
I've got a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Joyce.
So, what I have been trying to make a practice, but since you're a listing agent and you do so much, I want your feedback, please. So my one of my strategies with my buyers is to say we're offering earnest money as well. I know I don't hear a lot of people offering earnest money lately, but I just kind of feel like it's important to let the seller know that we're not going to ride out the clock. Once we get past due diligence, we still have more skin in the game. What is your thoughts on that?
So give me a scenario of how much you offering in due diligence.
They always say, well, what do you suggest? And I'm like, I can't suggest whatever you're comfortable with. But say on $250,000 home, probably 3 to 5.
Oh, that's significant. 3 to 5,000.
It is. Yeah.
That's
And
significant.
so I tell them either to split it half and half. And that way it's, there's still skin in the game initially, but, once we get our inspections and everything, technically we could just write it. If we decide we don't want it, we've lost it as far as day one goes, we've lost it. And just as an assurance to the seller that we're still willing to be moving forward. And anyway, yeah, that.
Oh, for simplicity, and honestly, I no longer see value in earnest money.
Okay.
As a listing agent and representing sellers, due diligence is all we really focus on. Because if you're not willing to risk it all from the get-go, that already shows me a little bit of hesitation in your confidence to move forward to closing. So if you bring
Okay.
me an offer, and I'll just tell you like my negotiating tactic in this situation, if you bring me an offer with $3,000 in due diligence and 2,000 in earnest money, I'm going to counter you 5,000 in due diligence. Because if you are capable of bringing me five, I would much rather have it in due diligence.
I see.
Does that make sense?
It does, yeah.
And that's where like the seller and the buyers are, that's why I don't practice dual agency because it's hard to like help both people. That situation protects the seller. But I also want to tell you, as a buyer's agent, you are protecting you too.
Hmm.
Because the more money and time you invest with a buyer who is quick to walk away because they don't have as much money tied up into it, you devalue yourself a little bit. And that's never my prerogative. That's not ever my focus. But in reality, I remember, and I'm saying this from a place of like, I remember a market where we were giving $500 to $1,000 in due diligence money. In today's world, that's easy for people to walk away from,
Hmm. Yeah.
right? Um, I think it's much cleaner when it's just due diligence money. To a seller, it shows me you're much more serious.
Okay. So if my buyer does have some reservation, um,
The other thing I've seen that a lot of sellers I feel like is additional due diligence money versus earnest money. And really,
what explain that?
so let's say we did this in a situation. So let's say we went under a contract, we gave them $2,500 in due diligence money now. After we got past the home inspection, we gave them another 2,500 in addition to due diligence. So now they have $5,000 in due diligence after we've gotten past the home inspection.
And that's only different because they can spend it right now and they would lose that as well versus earnest money, which is just going to be credited at closing.
Yeah, credited at closing or
Gotcha.
it's not necessarily the benefit if they can spend it right now. It's more that the earnest money, if we got additional earnest money or got earnest money, I mean, you have to battle it out to get that to release. Very,
Okay.
very,
Yeah, I
you know
see.
what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I get that does make more sense. I do like that.
Yeah.
Okay. And yeah, so it's really acting as if it's acting in the same way, only less hassle
Yeah.
and more direct, probably.
Cleaner, more direct. I
Yeah.
think it conveys a higher level of confidence. It shows a seller that like you're willing to keep it moving forward. You're serious.
Hmm.
I think sometimes in the back of my mind, this is how I think, that earnest money is like dangling a carrot of we may terminate
I could see that.
because it's why not give it in due diligence if you're really
So
about the house?
would you not feel that same way by adding additional due diligence money? It doesn't feel the same to you to do
Well,
that?
it doesn't feel the same because that additional due diligence is immediately non-refundable.
Gotcha. Hmm.
It's more,
I like that. So I think I could present that to buyers
yeah,
in the same regard, but be more attractive to sellers.
yeah. It's more
Okay.
attractive to sellers, but for a buyer, I think that makes them feel like they're not going all in without having a home inspection done.
Yep. Yeah. I like that. Thank you.
Yeah, you're so welcome. Any other questions? I'm an open book. I mean, you can ask me how I style my hair, whatever you want to ask me. Not today. Today's a little messy. But I'm here. I have 10 more minutes.
What are the kind of things that you like have in your back pocket? Like if you're not moving forward in a negotiation, like I noticed when we were negotiating, you pulled out like washer, dryer, refrigerator. It wasn't even something that we had like thought about. But like what are other like little tactics like that? Because you didn't budge on price when you came back with that. So like things like that, that like, hey, this might not be moving this number, but like these are other things that help us get there.
I always think the more that you can step back out of the transaction and think big picture. So let's say every scenario is different. Let's say I have a house that I'm selling that's on 10 acres, that they have a riding lawnmower. That riding lawnmower may be a little bit of value, It's not something we can put on the contract, but I would come back and say, hey, the riding lawnmower conveys at no value at $500,000. And sometimes that buyer has not even thought, I got to look at buying a riding lawnmower. I haven't even thought about it. And it's $7,500. So to them, it's like they just got $7,500 back. I think anytime that you can take personal property within realm, you can't ever put these things on a contract. You have to do a separate bill of sale, FYI, and it has to say, the bill of sale has to say convey at no value. But anytime that you can throw things that are really going to cost that buyer money into it. Okay, so let's look at this reverse. Let's say that seller's going to have to sell. That seller's downsizing and they're moving to the coast and they don't need their lawnmower. They don't need half the furniture that's in the house. And you know this because you talked to the listing agent. Some of what may make your offer desirable is handling that stuff for them. Like I've had one house, these people were moving, they just took their clothes and they left everything else. And we took a lower price offer for that reason. Because honestly, it was going to be easier for my seller. So these are the situations, Megan, you got to talk to the listing agent and really figure out like what is the seller's situation? Are they downsizing? Are they no longer going to need X, Y, and Z? And sometimes you'll just win you've made it easy for that seller.
Mhm.
And that was worth more than the money. Other unique situations, we have paid 2 years of HOA fees versus like lowering the price. A lot of my builders don't love to lower the price, but they'll do like blinds, appliances. Right now, you really just need to talk to builders. All builders are offering incentives of some capacity. Um, and sometimes buyers see value in that. To maybe the seller, they were just going to donate it or have somebody come pick stuff up, but like this buyer may have loved all that stuff. I hate dealing with personal items. There always something comes up, but sometimes they can bring a deal together. A swing set, I mean, anything. It can be.
Can you speak again, the separate bill of sale?
Yes.
I'm not familiar with that at all.
So we have a separate, just like literally bill of sale that says seller conveys blank, blank, and blank at no value to the buyer. Everything will remain in the home after closing, and we just have both parties sign it. We don't send it to the lender, but it's just like a contractual agreement between the seller and buyer that like this personal stuff is staying at no value. I mean, sometimes it is of value. Like sometimes after we've reached a deal and went through the due diligence period, my seller and my buyer have worked out $20,000 exchange for furniture and TVs and whatever else.
Now, is that just with your company that you have that bill of sale? Did you have an attorney draft that, or how would I do
Yeah, I
that?
think had an attorney draft. We can probably send you a copy. Text me whatever email Joyce you want me to send it to, and we'll send you a copy of it. Because we use
Okay,
it,
thank you.
I would say a few times a year we use that bill of sale.
And then about that, how is that different than like whatever you put on the contract, like the offer to purchase, like when there's like pool equipment or just like one of the houses that we're talking about right now, they are offering a generator. Like there was on the MLS that you get a generator, like with the house. So how
So
does
anything that's essentially affixed in some way, shape, or form can be on the contract.
okay?
Things such as furniture, riding lawnmowers, a trampoline, anything extra like that, you need to have as a separate bill of sale because essentially it's considered personal property and it's not
Okay.
attached to the house in any way, form of the imagination. Joyce, I'm gonna write Joyce sells 246. Perfect. I'm gonna send you that bill of sale. Alrighty, anything else anybody has? So welcome. We're gonna do, I don't know if I'm gonna do it next week or the week after. I'm getting ready to start advertising it, but we're gonna do an agent financials class. Um, I have realized that's something a lot of people avoid. I don't know how well attended it will be, but I've had a lot of people asking me questions, so it better be highly attended. But it's an uncomfortable room for a lot of people. We're going to go over how to do a P&L, how to set yourself up as an LLC, how to pay yourself, what does that dynamic look like? Because a lot of people just run by the seat of their pants. And I think one of the places where we all could lean into is your confidence can come from just understanding your business financially at a higher level. So stay tuned for that. I don't know if I'll do it next week or the week after. I need to see how my week goes because I need to prep some good slides for that and do some back end work. But stay tuned. But thank you, everybody, especially everybody that's made it through all of them. I appreciate. I got a few hearts. Thank you. Um, invite people to the next one. The more, the merrier. I'd love to see more people on these, but I value and love and appreciate all of you. So much love. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Perfect.